You've tried to make sense of it. You've tried to forgive, to move on, to understand why someone who claimed to love you chose to betray you. And none of it has settled, because you've been asking the wrong question. Because the real question isn't why they did it. It's why, after betraying someone like you specifically, they can never seem to fully recover from it. And the answer to that question is not what most people expect. Because most people assume the avoidant walks away clean, that they feel relieved, that they move on fast and feel nothing. And some of them do move fast. But fast is not the same as fine. And what looks like moving on is often something else entirely. Something quieter, something that doesn't show up immediately, but builds slowly into a weight they don't quite have a language for. Here is what you are getting wrong about this. You have been measuring their recovery by what you can see, by whether they posted something, started dating someone new, or seemed unbothered. But the avoidance damage doesn't live on the surface. It never has. That's the whole point of avoidance. The fallout from betraying a super empath doesn't look like a breakdown. It looks like a person who keeps almost getting back to okay, but never quite does. Research from the University of California has shown that avoidant individuals, despite appearing emotionally detached, experience just as much emotional distress in relationships as anxious partners. They simply suppress the outward expression of it. Their nervous system is not less active. It is more defended, which means the damage doesn't disappear. It goes inward. It gets buried under behavior, under new relationships, under performance of being fine. And buried things do not heal. They calcify. I see this with my clients every single day. People who were betrayed by avoidant partners sitting across from me, not because they want the avoidant back, but because they cannot understand why, months or even years later, they are hearing that this person is still not okay, still restless, still unable to build something that goes as deep, still carrying something they cannot seem to put down. And my clients are confused because they're the ones who were hurt. They're the ones who were betrayed. So, why does the person who did it seem more haunted? By the end of this, you will understand exactly why. Why the avoidant cannot simply reset after betraying a super empath the way they might after other relationships end. Why the specific qualities of the super empath make this particular loss one the avoidance system is not built to process. And why that has nothing to do with you waiting for them or hoping they come back. And everything to do with finally understanding what actually happened. So you can stop carrying a story that was never yours to carry. So let's start with what the betrayal actually is when it comes from avoidant. Because most people misread it as cruelty, as not caring, as proof that the love was never real. But that is not usually what it is. What it actually is, in most cases, is a person who got closer to real intimacy than their nervous system knew how to handle, and then blew it up before it could cost them even more. The betrayal was an exit, not a clean one, not a conscious one in many cases, but an exit. A way to create distance when the closeness became too much to sit inside. The avoidant did not betray you because you meant nothing. In many cases, they betrayed you because you meant too much, and they had no tools for that. That does not make it okay. It does not reduce the damage it caused you, but it changes the picture entirely, because it means the betrayal was not the end of their story. It was a moment their avoidance stopped being invisible. It was a moment their pattern had consequences they could not simply withdraw from. And that is something the avoidance system was never prepared for. Now here is why betraying a super empath specifically is different from betraying someone else. The super empath did not just love them. They saw them fully. Most people in the avoidance life related to the version they performed, the capable, self-sufficient, low-maintenance version. The super empath saw past that. They noticed a shift in tone before anyone else did. They felt the withdrawal before it was spoken. They held space for the avoidant's inner world in a way that was quiet and consistent and completely without agenda. And for the avoidant, that level of being seen without being suffocated by it is extraordinarily rare. Most of them have never experienced it before. And then they destroyed it, not with distance this time, not with a slow fade they had used in every relationship before. They destroyed it with an active choice that made it impossible for the super empath to stay. And the super empath, true to who they are, did not fall apart publicly. They did not chase. They did not beg or bargain or send the long messages at 2 a.m. They grieved, deeply, privately, and then they left with the kind of quiet dignity that the avoidant had no script for, because every other ending the avoidant had experienced came with chaos, with anger, with someone who made the ending about them. This one was different. This ending was clear. And that clarity was the most destabilizing thing the avoidant had ever faced. This is the core of why the recovery doesn't come easily. The avoidant psychological pattern has always depended on a very specific dynamic. one where they hold control. In past relationships, when things ended, there was always something to point to. The other person got too emotional. The other person became too demanding. The other person couldn't handle my need for space. Those stories gave the avoidant an exit from accountability. The ending had an explanation that kept their own behavior off the table. But with the super empath, there is no story like that available. The super empath was not too much. They were not demanding or chaotic or difficult. They were, by any honest measure, exactly what the avoidant always said they wanted. And the avoidant betrayed them anyway. That is a very hard truth to build a clean story around. So instead of processing it, the avoidant does what they have always done. They move. They stay busy. They start something new before the old thing has finished settling. And for a while it works. The new person is exciting. The surface is fresh. There is no weight yet, no real knowing, no vulnerability that has been allowed to go that deep. But depth has a way of being missed even by people who are afraid of it. And at some point, in a quiet moment, in a conversation that almost goes somewhere real, but doesn't, in the space between one distraction and the next, the avoidant feels a difference. They feel what is missing, and what is missing has your shape. The guilt does not look like guilt in an avoidant. It looks like irritability. It looks like a pattern of almost but not quite in every relationship that follows. It looks like someone who keeps starting things and losing interest right around the point where real intimacy would begin. It looks like a person who is technically available but emotionally somewhere else. The people around them may not be able to name it. The avoidant themselves may not be able to name it, but it is there. It is the unprocessed weight of having destroyed something they cannot replace and never fully admitted, even to themselves, that they wanted to keep. Now, most people try to win an avoidant back after something like this by doing more. More reassurance, more patience, more emotional effort, more explaining, more waiting. And that instinct makes complete sense, because when something breaks, the natural response is to work harder to fix it. But the shift that actually changes a dynamic is not doing more. It is doing something completely different. It is stopping the managing, the monitoring, the adjusting, and starting to protect yourself instead. The first shift is that you stop chasing emotional clarity. Before, you needed to know where you stood. You needed the conversation, the confirmation, the reassurance that things were okay. After the betrayal, something in you changes. You stop asking whether they still want this, and you start watching what they actually do. That shift alone removes an enormous amount of pressure from the dynamic and replaces it with something the avoidant has rarely experienced from you: accountability without confrontation. The second shift is that you become calm instead of reactive. Avoidants withdraw when emotional intensity rises. It is one of the most consistent patterns in this attachment style. When you stop meeting their distance with urgency, when you respond to a shutdown with quiet space instead of an argument, something changes in the energy between you. Calm does not mean cold. It means your nervous system is no longer available to absorb theirs. And that steadiness over time is the only thing that creates actual safety in this dynamic. The third shift is that your life stops revolving around them. This one is energetic as much as it is practical. Your world fills back up with your friendships, your goals, your routines, the parts of yourself you quietly set aside while you're focused on managing their emotional temperature. You stop letting their response time determine your mood. And the effect of that is not just internal. The avoidant notices, not always consciously, but they notice. The fourth shift is that you stop trying to fix them. This is a turning point that is harder than it sounds for a super empath, because fixing, understanding, explaining, holding space for is almost instinctive. But when you stop diagnosing their behavior, stop offering the emotional roadmap back to you, stop doing the inner work on their behalf, the responsibility returns to where it always belonged, with them. The fifth shift is that your boundaries become quiet but firm, not ultimatums, not dramatic exits or announced decisions, just consistency. When something does not feel right, you step back without negotiating your worth. The avoidant does not respond to emotional pressure in the long run. They respond to patterns. And a pattern of quiet, consistent limits is the only language that actually registers. The sixth shift, and this is the real one, is that you become genuinely comfortable with walking away, not as a threat, not as a strategy to make them panic, but as a real internal truth. You are okay if this does not work. You have stopped trying to secure the relationship and started securing your own peace. And that is often, strangely, the exact moment the avoidant leans in, not because you played it right, but because for the first time, the relationship stopped feeling like a trap and started feeling like a choice. There are two directions this can go after all of this. The first is that the avoidant does the real work. They stop running fast enough to sit inside the discomfort of what they actually did. They confront the fear of intimacy that made the betrayal feel like survival at the time. They build a capacity to stay when things get close instead of burning it down. That is a real outcome. It happens, but it requires a level of self-honesty that most avoidants spend years resisting. The second direction is that they don't. They stay in the pattern. They keep moving, keep staying shallow, keep choosing new beginnings because new beginnings don't ask anything of them yet. And they carry the weight of what happened with you quietly, indefinitely, in a way that shapes every relationship they enter after. Either way, none of that is your work to do. Avoidants rarely choose someone because they were chased. They choose when a relationship feels safe, calm, and free of control. And those conditions only appear when you stop trying to manage the outcome entirely. You did not fail this person. You loved them in a way most people never experience. Fully, honestly, without agenda. They were not ready for it. Sometimes a shift that makes someone choose you is the moment you stop needing them to. And you, quietly, completely, have already begun building something they will spend a very long time trying to find again.